The palace of the Dragon Emperor was not a place for humans. It was made of black stone that shined like fire under torchlight. The ceiling was so high it vanished in shadows, and golden banners of the Emperor's crest hung from every wall. Dragons in armor stood like statues along the throne room, their claws gripping long spears, their wings folded but ready. The air smelled of smoke and iron. In one corner of this endless hall, a young human waitress moved quietly. Her name was Lyra. She wore a plain gray dress, carrying a tray of water bowls for the guards. She had worked here for months, but she had learned to keep her head down, her steps soft, and her eyes low. Humans were not respected here. They were servants, nothing more. If she made one mistake, she knew she might not live to fix it. Then the doors opened with a thunder that shook the floor. The Dragon Emperor entered. He was taller than all others, his scales deep crimson, his horns sharp like black blades. A golden crown sat upon his head, and his eyes burned like twin suns. Behind him walked guards, and in his arms was something small, something that did not roar, did not claw, and did not shine with strength. It was a hatchling. The court grew silent as the Emperor walked down the hall, holding the child close to his chest. The hatchling's scales were pale and cracked, broken in many places. Its wings looked too weak to ever fly. Some dragons lowered their eyes, ashamed of what they saw. Others whispered, their voices filled with scorn. The Emperor stopped before his throne. He lowered himself into the seat, but as he moved, the fragile hatchling slipped from his arm. With a soft cry, the little one fell, rolling down the steps of the throne. The room gasped. No dragon moved. None dared. To touch the Emperor's child without command was death. Every guard stood frozen, eyes wide, waiting for orders. But the hatchling lay there on the cold stone floor, crying softly, its small claws scraping weakly as it tried to lift itself. And then Lyra moved. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her legs carried her forward before she could think. The tray of bowls clattered to the floor behind her as she ran across the hall. She knelt down, her hands gentle as she lifted the broken-scaled hatchling into her arms. Its body was warm, trembling, and its small head pressed against her chest. Silence fell like a heavy weight. Every dragon in the hall turned toward her. Dozens of golden eyes glowed in the shadows, staring, unblinking. The guards gripped their spears tighter. Even the torches seemed to flicker lower, as if the fire itself held its breath. The Emperor's gaze locked on her. He did not roar. He did not move. His burning eyes studied the human girl holding his heir. The weight of that stare crushed Lyra's spirit, but she could not set the child down. The hatchling's tiny claws clung to her dress, and its soft cries pierced through the silence. She whispered without thinking, "It's okay, you're safe now." The words were meant for the hatchling, but the court heard them. Dragons shifted uneasily. Some sneered. Others stared in disbelief. A human had dared to hold the Emperor's blood, dared to comfort it as if it were her own. The Emperor rose slowly from his throne. The sound of his claws against the stone echoed like thunder. He stepped down the stairs, his wings stretching slightly, his shadow growing larger with each step. Lyra's knees trembled, but she held the hatchling tighter. She expected fire. She expected claws. She expected to die in that moment. But death did not come. The Emperor stopped in front of her. He looked down, his face unreadable. For a long, endless moment he said nothing. The silence was worse than any scream. The entire court seemed to lean forward, waiting. Then the hatchling lifted its head. It looked at the Emperor, then pressed itself closer against Lyra's chest, hiding its face. A low rumble came from the Emperor's throat. Not anger, something else. Something no one in the hall could name. Still, he said nothing. The guards shifted uneasily. One dragon, bold enough to speak, growled, "My Emperor, the human." A single look from the Emperor silenced him. The hall grew colder. No one dared to move. Lyra felt her breath catch. She slowly knelt down and tried to place the hatchling back onto the floor, but the small creature wailed and clung tighter to her dress. Its cracked scales scraped against her skin, but she did not push it away. The emperor watched every movement. His eyes narrowed. At last he spoke. "Why?" His voice was deep, a mountain breaking. "Why do you touch what is mine?" Lyra swallowed hard. Her voice shook, but she answered, "Because no one else would." Her words hung in the air like a spark in dry grass. Whispers filled the court. Dragons hissed, claws clicking, wings twitching. A human had dared to speak so openly, so boldly, before the emperor himself. But the emperor did not strike her down. Instead, he turned. He walked back to his throne and sat, his gaze still fixed on the human girl with his broken-scaled heir in her arms. The room trembled with silence. No one understood what had just happened. And Lyra, kneeling in the middle of the great hall, felt the hatchling's heartbeat against her chest. She knew in that moment her life had changed forever. She was no longer invisible. She had been seen by the Dragon Emperor himself. And the look in his eyes told her one thing: her fate would not be simple. The great hall of the Dragon Empire still held its breath. Lyra knelt on the cold floor, the broken-scaled hatchling clinging to her chest as if she were its only shield in the world. The sound of its soft, uneven breathing filled her ears, but all around her there was nothing. No words, no movement, only the heavy weight of dragon eyes burning into her. Above them, the torches hissed as if nervous. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisted shapes of wings and horns. The guards who lined the chamber did not move. Their spears stayed upright, but their claws gripped tighter, as if ready to strike the moment the emperor gave the command. Yet the command never came. The Dragon Emperor sat high upon his throne again, his crimson scales glowing like a sea of embers in the torchlight. His face showed no rage, no mercy, only silence. His golden eyes stayed fixed on the human girl who dared hold his child. His stillness was more terrifying than any roar. It felt as if the very stones of the palace were waiting for him to break the silence. But he did not. Whispers broke out along the edges of the hall. Dragons in robes, advisors and nobles, leaned closer to each other, speaking in voices they thought were hidden. She defies the law. She insults his blood. No one touches the air without command. She will burn. Lyra heard every word. Her hands shook, but she did not let go of the hatchling. Its small claws dug into her dress, its cracked scales scratching her skin. The child hid its face in her arms, as though afraid of the golden eyes that stared from the throne. She bowed her head, not daring to meet the emperor's gaze. She whispered only to the hatchling, "It's all right. I will not let you fall." The words were simple, but in the vast chamber they seemed louder than they should have been. The emperor leaned back in his throne, and for the first time his tail moved, curling against the floor with a sound like chains dragging on stone. The deep rumble of his breath filled the silence. Then his voice came, slow, heavy, and sharp. "Why does my blood cling to you, human?" The question echoed, rolling through the hall like thunder. Every dragon turned their eyes on Lyra, waiting for her answer. Her lips trembled. She had no right to speak. No servant had ever spoken in defense before the emperor. To speak wrong now could mean death, and yet if she stayed silent, she would be nothing but a coward kneeling in shame. She lifted her head slightly, her voice thin but steady. "Because I caught him when he fell." No one else moved. Gasps filled the hall. Some dragons growled low in their throats. Others sneered with sharp teeth glinting. A human had dared to accuse them, to suggest they were cowards who let the air fall while she alone acted. The emperor's eyes narrowed, but still he did not roar. He simply stared at her. One of the nobles could not hold his tongue. A great dragon in green armor stepped forward, wings snapping open in anger. "My emperor! This insult cannot stand. The human must be punished. If she is allowed to live after touching the air, after speaking such words, then what honor is left in the court?" The emperor did not look at him. He did not look at anyone else. His gaze stayed locked on Lyra. The silence stretched longer. The noble bowed his head, unsure, then stepped back, trembling. Even the boldest could not stand too long in the fire of that gaze. Lyra felt her throat dry. Her arms ached from holding the hatchling, but she did not let go. She thought of running, thought of placing the child down and begging for mercy. But something inside her whispered no. If she put the hatchling down now, she would be nothing. If she held on, perhaps she could survive. The Emperor leaned forward at last. His voice dropped, low and dark. You speak with boldness, human. Do you know what it costs? Her heart pounded. Her mouth opened before she could stop herself. I know what it costs to do nothing. The hall froze again. The dragons shifted, scales grinding. To them, the human's words were madness. But the Emperor still did not strike her. His silence now carried a different weight, curiosity. The hatchling stirred, letting out a weak cry, a broken sound that cracked the tension. It tried to lift its wings but failed, collapsing again against Lyra's chest. She held it tighter. The Emperor's claws tapped against the arm of his throne, one slow strike at a time. He was thinking, weighing, testing. At last he rose. The sound of his movement filled the hall like rolling thunder. He stepped down from his throne, one heavy step after another, until he stood in front of Lyra again. The floor shook beneath his weight. Every dragon leaned forward, certain this was the moment he would burn her alive. But instead he bent lower, his eyes at her level. The flames of his breath glowed faintly behind his teeth, but his voice came soft, so soft only she could hear. You are not like the others. Lyra's breath caught. She did not know if it was praise, warning, or a sentence of death. Then the Emperor straightened. He turned back toward the throne without another word. The court erupted in whispers again. Louder this time, voices clashing like steel. What does this mean? Why does he not kill her? Is the human favored? This is madness. The Emperor raised one clawed hand, and silence fell instantly. His words carried across the chamber, cold and sharp. No one touches the air again. No one but me. The command was clear. Yet his eyes, when they flickered once more to Lyra, told another truth. He had seen something in her he did not name. And as the hall emptied, dragons leaving in uneasy silence, Lyra stayed frozen in place, still holding the broken-scaled hatchling. She did not know why she was still alive. She only knew that the Emperor's silence was not mercy. It was a storm waiting to break. The night after the throne room incident, the palace did not sleep. The torches burned low, casting long shadows across the black stone halls. Guards patrolled in silence, their armor rattling softly as they passed. From the highest towers to the deepest chambers, one truth spread like fire. Every dragon had seen the Emperor's silence, and none of them understood it. The human girl should have been ash. Yet she lived. She had even held the air. The whispers grew louder with every passing hour. Some called it a shame to dragon pride. If the Emperor allows humans to touch the air, what next? Will humans sit at our tables? Will they rule beside us? Others spoke in hushed fear. Did the Emperor see something? Did the child choose her? If so, what does it mean? By dawn, the palace had become a nest of secrets. Lyra did not know how much danger she was in. She sat in the servants' quarters, the cracked-scaled hatchling asleep against her lap. She had not been sent away, nor had anyone dared take the child from her arms. The Emperor had given no further orders. That silence was more frightening than punishment. The other human servants avoided her. They looked at her with wide eyes, whispering as they carried food and water. Some begged her to keep away from them, afraid the Emperor's wrath might spread to anyone close. Others, braver, asked her what it felt like to hold the air, to survive the gaze of the Emperor himself. Lyra had no answers. She only knew that her heart had not stopped racing since that moment in the hall. Late in the evening, when the corridors were quieter, two figures approached her. They were dragons, but not armored guards. Their scales were dark, their robes plain, and their steps careful. They moved like shadows, slipping past the patrols until they reached her small chamber. One of them, a tall dragon with gray scales and sharp eyes, closed the door behind him. You are the human. he said softly, his voice deep but controlled. The one who held the air. Lyra stood quickly, clutching the hatchling tighter. Yes. The second dragon, shorter but with wings marked by scars, stepped forward. His voice was lower, almost a whisper. Do you understand what you have done? Do you understand what power you now hold? She shook her head. I only caught him. He was falling. I did what anyone should have done. The scarred dragon hissed. No, that is not what matters. What matters is that you touched the Emperor's blood and lived. That child clung to you. Every eye in the court saw it. The air chose you. And now... He leaned closer, his golden eyes sharp as blades. Now, the Empire trembles. Lyra's knees weakened. She whispered, I don't want power. I only wanted to protect him. The gray-scaled dragon's face darkened. It does not matter what you want. The others will not see it that way. Already the nobles plot. Some will try to kill you. Some will try to take the air. And some... His eyes flickered, his voice dropping even lower. Some will beg you to stand against the Emperor himself. Her breath caught. Stand against him? The scarred dragon's wings twitched. There are those who believe the Emperor has grown weak. That his silence proved it. For him to let a human live after such an insult? It shakes the foundation of all dragon law. They whisper of rebellion. And you, human, are at the center of it. You are the symbol. Lyra shook her head furiously. No, I am nothing. I am only a servant. The gray dragon's gaze softened, but only slightly. Not anymore. Whether you wish it or not, the hatchling clings to you. The court saw it. The child may be broken-scaled, weak and fragile, but he is still heir. If he grows, if he survives, then whoever holds his trust may shape the empire itself. The hatchling stirred in her arms, letting out a soft whimper. She rocked him gently, her voice trembling. He is only a child. He needs care, not war. The scarred dragon laughed bitterly. Care? In this palace, care is weakness. That child is already a weapon, even if he does not yet breathe fire. The gray-scaled one stepped closer, lowering his voice. We are not your enemies. We want the empire to survive. But listen well, human. You must be careful. Every step you take now is watched. Every breath. One mistake, and the Emperor may burn you alive to calm the noble's rage. One wrong ally, and you may vanish before the sun rises. Lyra swallowed hard, her chest tight. She wanted to scream, to run, to hide. But she looked down at the fragile hatchling, sleeping peacefully against her. His small body felt so fragile, yet so warm. She could not abandon him. She whispered, almost to herself, I will protect him, whatever it takes. The scarred dragon tilted his head. Then you may survive. Perhaps. The two dragons left as silently as they came, vanishing into the corridors. When they were gone, Lyra sat back down on the floor, holding the hatchling close. Her hands trembled, her heart pounded, but her resolve grew stronger. She did not understand the politics of dragons, nor the power games of nobles. But she knew one thing, this child needed her, and she would not let him go. Far above, in the highest tower of the palace, the Emperor himself stood alone, staring out across the dark horizon. His wings were folded, his claws clasped behind his back. He had spoken no word of punishment. He had given no order of mercy. He had only watched. And as the night winds howled across the empire, he whispered to himself words no one else could hear. The court stirs. The fire spreads. Let them whisper. Let them fear. I will see who dares to touch what is mine. The silence of the Emperor was no mercy at all. It was a storm waiting to fall, and the human girl at its center did not yet understand how much blood it would bring. The palace was never truly quiet, but that night it felt different. The guards walked heavier, their wings half open, their eyes restless. The air smelled sharper, like smoke before a storm. Something unseen pressed against the walls of the great fortress, something waiting to break. Lyra sensed it. She had not slept. The broken-scaled hatchling lay curled against her chest, breathing softly, but her eyes stayed fixed on the small wooden door of her servant's chamber. She felt like every shadow outside it hid danger. Every sound in the hallway made her heart race. The words of the gray-scaled dragon echoed in her head. Some will try to kill you. Some will try to take the air. She wished those had been only warnings. But deep inside, she knew they were truths. It began with silence. The usual sounds of armor and claws scraping the floor faded. The torches outside her door flickered, one by one, until darkness pressed close. Even the hatchling stirred, as if sensing something wrong. Then came the footsteps. Soft, too soft for dragons in armor. Lyra held her breath. She tightened her hold on the hatchling, pressing his fragile body close. She looked around the tiny room, no weapon, no escape. Only her bare hands and the thin blanket on the bed. The door creaked. Slowly, painfully, a shadow slid through, long and lean. Then another. Then a third. 3 figures, cloaked and hooded, their movements sharp and silent. They were not guards. They were not nobles. Their eyes glowed faintly beneath the hoods, and their claws glimmered with steel blades coated in dark liquid. Assassins. One raised a finger to his lips, signaling the others. Their steps made no sound as they moved closer. Their eyes were fixed on the hatchling in her arms. Lyra's chest tightened. She whispered to the small dragon, her voice shaking. "Stay quiet, stay with me." The hatchling whimpered, too weak to cry loudly, but the sound made the assassins pause. The one in front tilted his head, then raised his blade. Lyra did the only thing she could. She screamed. Her voice ripped through the night, echoing down the corridors. She pulled the blanket over the hatchling, wrapped him close, and threw herself against the far wall as the assassins leapt forward. Claws slashed the air where she had been. Stone cracked where blades struck. She ducked, stumbled, and felt fire tear across her arm. Pain exploded, but she held on to the hatchling with all her strength. The assassins closed in. One hissed, "Give him to us, human, and you may live." Lyra shook her head, teeth clenched. "Never." The first assassin raised his blade high, but before it struck, the world roared. The doors of the palace hall burst open with a thunder like mountains breaking. Fire blazed through the corridors, hot enough to blind. And in that fire, a shadow rose. Massive wings spread wide, scales glowing red like molten rock. The Dragon Emperor had come. The assassins froze, but too late. The Emperor's roar shook the stones. Flames erupted from his jaws, a torrent of fire that swallowed the first assassin whole. The hooded figure screamed once before turning to ash. The others scattered, but the Emperor was faster. His claws struck the second, ripping through cloak and bone, sending the body crashing against the wall with a sickening crack. The third assassin tried to run, but fire chased him down the corridor, wrapping him in flames until nothing remained but smoke. Silence fell again, broken only by the hiss of cooling stone and Lyra's ragged breathing. The Emperor stood in the doorway, smoke rising from his jaws, his eyes burning brighter than the torches. He looked at Lyra, at the human girl pressed against the wall, blood dripping from her arm, clutching his broken scaled air as if her life depended on it. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly he stepped forward. His shadow covered her, his claws reaching down. Lyra flinched, thinking he meant to take the child from her, or worse. But instead, his claws gently brushed her wounded arm. His touch was surprisingly careful, almost protective. "You shielded him," the Emperor said, his voice low and dangerous. "With your own body." Lyra swallowed, her throat dry. "I could not let them hurt him." The Emperor's gaze burned into her. His silence pressed heavy, but this time it was different. Not cold judgment. Something else. Something like respect. The hatchling stirred, lifting his cracked-scaled head. He looked at the Emperor, then pressed back against Lyra's chest. The choice was clear. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, but he did not try to take the child. Instead, he turned his head toward the corridors, his voice rising like thunder. "Guards!" The palace shook as armored dragons rushed from every hall. They bowed low, trembling at the sight of the ash and blood. "Seal the palace," the emperor commanded. "No one enters. No one leaves. Find who sent them. Burn them all if you must." The guards roared in unison, their voices echoing through the stone halls, then scattered to obey. The emperor turned back to Lyra. His eyes softened for the first time, not with kindness, but with a strange, heavy decision. "You are no longer a servant," he said. "From this night forward, you are protector of the air." The words struck like lightning. Lyra froze, her heart racing. She had been invisible hours ago, a girl who carried trays and water. Now the emperor himself had given her a title. The throne room had been silent when she held the hatchling. Now the silence of the empire would shatter into screams, because a human had just been named guardian of the dragon emperor's blood. And the fires that began this night would not die easily. The dawn after the fire felt heavy across the dragon palace. Smoke still lingered in the air, crawling from cracks in the walls where flames had torn through stone. Guards worked tirelessly, dragging away the blackened remains of assassins, while servants scrubbed blood and ash from the marble floors. But no amount of cleaning could wash away what had happened. The emperor had been attacked. The heir had nearly been killed. And worse, a human had been declared his protector. The court gathered that morning in the throne room. Dragons from every noble house filled the vast chamber, their scales gleaming with anger, their wings half spread in unrest. They whispered furiously, their voices overlapping like the hiss of boiling water. "She cannot remain. This is madness. A human guarding the air? It is an insult to every dragon alive. She should be burned." At the far end of the hall, the great doors opened. The emperor entered, his crimson scales shining under the golden light, his wings folded like banners of war. His presence silenced the room at once. Behind him, armored guards flanked the path, and at his side, walking slowly, was Lyra. She held the hatchling in her arms, wrapped in soft cloth, his broken scales still fragile but his small eyes awake and alert. His claws clung tightly to her dress, refusing to let go. The court erupted again, their outrage exploding louder than before. "Unthinkable! She dares walk beside him? She is a servant. Nothing more." The emperor raised one clawed hand, and silence crashed down like stone. He climbed the steps of his throne and turned to face his people. His voice carried across the chamber, deep and commanding. "Last night, assassins entered this palace. They sought to kill my blood. They sought to end the line of the emperor." Murmurs spread quickly, but no one interrupted. "They failed," the emperor continued. "They failed because a human shielded my heir with her body. She stood where dragons hesitated. She faced blades where others turned away. And she did not falter." The words rang heavy in the hall. Lyra felt every eye on her, sharp as knives. The hatchling pressed closer into her chest, sensing the tension. The emperor's gaze swept over the crowd. "For this reason, I name her guardian of the air. She will walk beside him. She will protect him until her last breath. To harm her is to harm him. To question her place is to question me." The hall shook with fury. Dragons rose to their feet, roaring in protest. "This cannot be. Humans are weak. She dishonors us all." One noble, draped in golden armor, stepped forward boldly. His scales gleamed like polished bronze, and his voice thundered. "My emperor, this is folly. You raise a servant above your people. You place your blood in the hands of prey. Have you lost all sense of pride, all sense of power?" The emperor's eyes narrowed. His voice dropped lower, darker. "You question me, Lord Carveth?" The noble raised his chin. "I do, and many here agree with me. If you do not end this insult, the empire itself may turn against you." The hall gasped. No one had ever dared speak so openly against the emperor. The crimson dragon rose slowly from his throne. His wings unfolded, filling the chamber with shadows. Heat rolled from his body, the air itself trembling with fire. He stepped down toward the noble, each claw striking stone like thunder. Lord Carveth stood tall, but even his proud wings trembled. The Emperor stopped inches away, his golden eyes burning. His voice was a whisper, yet it carried like a roar. "You dare speak of pride? Where was your pride when my blood lay helpless on the floor? Where was your honor when assassins crept into these halls?" The noble's jaw tightened, but he could not answer. The Emperor's claw lashed out, faster than sight. It struck the stone beside Carveth's head, splitting the marble into cracks that spread like lightning. Fire burned between his teeth, hot enough to melt steel. The noble dropped to his knees, wings folded in surrender. The Emperor leaned closer, his words like molten iron. "If you speak again against her, I will burn you where you stand." He turned back to the court, his wings rising high. "This human has more courage than many of you combined. She is not prey. She is chosen. And if you cannot accept it, then you are unworthy to stand in my hall." Silence fell like a crushing weight. None dared answer. None dared move. Lyra stood frozen at the edge of the dais, the hatchling trembling against her. She felt the full force of the court's hatred pressing down on her. Dozens of golden eyes burned with fury, their claws itching for blood. But she also felt the Emperor's shadow above her, heavy and unbreakable. She did not know if she was safe, or if she had just been thrown into a storm far deadlier than assassins. Slowly, the Emperor returned to his throne. His gaze swept across the silent nobles. "Leave me, and remember what you have seen. The Guardian stands. She will remain, and she will not be touched." The nobles bowed stiffly, their faces tight with rage. One by one, they turned and left the chamber, their wings trailing like banners of defeat. But their silence was dangerous. Their anger would not stay hidden for long. When the last of them was gone, the Emperor looked at Lyra. For a brief moment, the fire in his eyes softened. "You fear them," he said quietly. Lyra swallowed, her voice low. "Yes. Good," he said. "Fear will keep you sharp. But never fear me." She looked at him, unsure. She remembered his claws tearing assassins apart, his fire turning stone to ash. How could she not fear him? Yet there was something in his voice, something she could not name. The hatchling stirred again, opening its weak eyes. It looked at the Emperor, then at Lyra, then pressed its head against her heart. The Emperor watched silently, but his tail flicked once, a small sign that did not go unnoticed. That day, the Empire left the throne room shaken. The nobles whispered of rebellion. The guards whispered of assassination. The servants whispered of a human raised higher than any had ever dreamed. And in the shadows of the palace, blades were sharpened, alliances were forged, and the fire of civil war began to smolder. The palace had not known true silence in centuries, but now it seemed every wall and corridor held its breath. After the Emperor's shocking decree, the empire itself felt shaken. Nobles whispered in private chambers, soldiers muttered in the barracks, and assassins sharpened their blades in the dark. Everyone knew one truth: this could not last. A human walking beside the heir? A waitress protecting the future emperor? It was a wound to dragon pride, and dragon wounds never healed without fire. Lyra felt it every step she took. Whenever she carried the hatchling through the palace halls, the servants bowed lower than before, not out of respect, but out of fear of being seen too close to her. Guards watched her with narrowed eyes, claws resting on blades. Even the air tasted heavy, as if poisoned by hatred. But the hatchling never let go of her. His small claws clung to her dress, his fragile wings curling against her chest. His broken scales brushed against her skin, sharp and rough, but his warmth pressed deep into her heart. Whenever fear made her knees weak, the sound of his soft breaths gave her strength. Still, the storm came. It began one night when the moon was high and silver light cut through the palace like a blade. The Emperor had left to oversee the outer defenses, leaving the heir under Lyra's watch. She sat in the nursery chamber, the hatchling asleep in her arms. The firelight from the braziers painted the stone walls with restless shadows. The door creaked open. At first, she thought it was one of the guards. but the figure that slipped inside wore no armor. Cloaked in black, silent as smoke, the intruder moved swiftly, a dagger glinting in his clawed hand. His eyes burned with the same fury she had seen in the throne room, noble fury. Her breath caught in her throat. There was no time to think. The hatchling stirred, whimpering softly. The assassin lunged. Lyra rolled off the seat, clutching the hatchling tight to her chest. The dagger cut the air where her head had been. She scrambled back, her feet slipping on the polished floor, but she refused to let go of the child. The assassin's hiss filled the chamber. The blood of the Empire will not be tainted by human hands. He slashed again. Lyra ducked, her heart pounding like thunder. Fear screamed in her mind, but something stronger burned inside her chest. The promise she had made when she shielded the hatchling the first time. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "You will not touch him." The assassin roared and lunged again, but this time the door burst open. A wave of fire ripped through the air, blazing so hot the braziers themselves exploded. The assassin was thrown back, his cloak burning, his screams echoing across the stone. The Emperor stepped into the chamber. His wings filled the room, his golden eyes burning with rage. His fire consumed the assassin in seconds, leaving only blackened ash on the floor. Lyra froze, still holding the hatchling. Her hands shook, her breath came ragged, but she did not let go. The Emperor's gaze shifted to her. For a moment, his fury did not fade. Then he saw the hatchling pressed against her chest, unharmed, alive, and clinging to her heartbeat. The fire dimmed. He walked toward her, each step heavy, each claw echoing like war drums. He stopped in front of her and lowered his head. His massive shadow covered her, yet his voice was quiet. "You did not run." Lyra swallowed, still shaking. "I couldn't. He needs me." For a long moment, the Emperor said nothing. Then he turned, his voice suddenly sharp as steel. "Guards!" The chamber filled with armored dragons at once. Their eyes darted to the ash on the floor, then to the trembling human, then to the hatchling in her arms. The Emperor's wings rose high. "Hear me. Another assassin entered these walls tonight. He failed as all will fail. But know this, he struck not at me, but at her. At the Guardian. And that makes his crime greater still." The guards bowed, but fear quivered in their eyes. The Emperor's voice shook the chamber. "Spread my words. To strike at the human is to strike at the heir. To plot against her is to plot against the throne. And to question her place is to invite my fire." The guards roared in unison, though some voices cracked with unease. They left quickly, carrying the message into the veins of the palace. When the chamber was empty again, the Emperor turned back to Lyra. His gaze softened, though his claws still twitched with fury. "Do you understand what you are now?" She shook her head slowly. "You are not a servant," he said. "You are not prey. You are protector of the heir, his shield, his strength. Until the day you fall, you will not leave his side." Lyra looked down at the hatchling. His fragile body, his broken scales, his weak wings. He should have been a burden to her. But instead, he felt like destiny. Her fear eased, replaced by something fiercer. She met the Emperor's gaze. "Then I will protect him, no matter what comes." For the first time, the Emperor's lips curled into something like a smile. Not kind, but proud, sharp, and dangerous. "Good," he said, "because what comes will be war." The next morning, the entire palace trembled with news. The Emperor had declared the human the protector of the heir, her life bound to his survival, her honor tied to the throne itself. The nobles howled in outrage, but their whispers could not drown the truth. A human, once nothing but a servant, now walked beside the most powerful hatchling in the Empire. And though blades would keep coming, though hatred would never fade, one thing was certain. The child would not stand alone. He had a protector, and her name was Lyra.